Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Thank you for joining us. We begin with breaking news. The chairman of the House panel investigating January 6th says former President Trump's chief of staff is now cooperating with the probe. Democratic Congressman Benny Thompson says Mark Meadows has handed over documents and will soon testify to share what he knew in the lead up and on the day of the attack. He previously snubbed lawmakers, citing executive privilege, the same reasoning Mr. Trump and his allies have used to stonewall Congress. That defense is being put to the test today as a federal appeals court is hearing oral arguments over whether lawmakers can receive Trump administration documents. Mr. Trump sued the Select Committee and the National Archives to keep those records secret. Joining me now is CBS congressional correspondent Nikole Killion, as well as CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. Welcome to both of you. Nikole, let's start with Mark Meadows. How significant is this decision to switch course and cooperate with the committee?
Yeah, well, I want to be clear by saying cooperate. We don't really know the full extent of cooperation. Obviously, it's enough cooperation to hold off the threat of contempt, with the chairman saying that Mark Meadows has been engaging with the committee through his attorney and has produced some records. But, the committee certainly wants more. It also appears that Mark Meadows will appear for a deposition. He was supposed to do that a couple weeks back. And when he did not do that, that is when the committee started threatening him with contempt. So it appears there is some level of cooperation. But like I said, I think we shouldn't read too much into it as Meadows fully cooperating, because we just don't know the extent of the cooperation. But it is significant from the standpoint of, the committee and Mark Meadows and his attorney really had been going back and forth for several weeks, if not months now. And again, when Mark Meadows didn't show up for that initial deposition a couple weeks back, that really did kind of increase tensions between the two sides. So it appears there is some cooling off, that, they're still talking, they're still engaging with each other, and that the committee hopefully, in its view, can glean further information from Meadows going forward.
All right. So a lot remains to be seen about the level of cooperation. But Jessica, do you think that Bannon's indictment could have impacted Meadows' decision here? And do you think that this could have a ripple effect on other subpoenaed officials?
Absolutely, it could. And I just want to echo what Nikole said. I mean, this is kind of like a promise to promise, or an agreement to have an agreement. This could be very tenuous, and we don't know exactly what was agreed upon when it comes to the scope of, for instance, asserting executive privilege. But could the fact that the House Select Committee and then the House made the decision, which really is very uncommon, to vote to refer Steve Bannon for criminal charges, and then that the Department of Justice is going forward with those criminal charges, could that have sent a signal to other people who are, frankly, not playing ball with the House Select Committee? Absolutely. And I think that we will see other witnesses also look at what happened with respect to Steve Bannon, what might happen with respect to others, and say, I don't want to be on the receiving end of a referral for criminal charges, and I don't want to be indicted by this Department of Justice. So I'm going to engage in a process of accommodation where I say, I'll give you this, not everything, but I'll give you some of it. And I'll talk to you about not everything, but some of it.
And Nikole, the committee continues to issue new subpoenas as it tries to get more officials to cooperate. What do we know about who else is cooperating with the probe?
Well, the committee continues to say that they've gotten cooperation. I believe they've spoken to nearly 200 witnesses at this point. And in fact, this week, more depositions are scheduled with a number of former White House officials, including former White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany. We don't know yet if she will appear for her deposition, which is scheduled for the end of the week. There are also people like the former president's campaign manager, Bill Stepien, other folks like Jason Miller, who was a senior advisor to the former president. So Stephen Miller, another top aide and advisor in the White House. So there are a number of former aides and top advisors that the committee is still looking to hear from. And so, again, we will know kind of in the coming weeks, certainly before the end of the month, if those officials do, in fact, engage the committee as well, if they appear for these depositions or if they don't. I will note that the committee does intend to move forward with contempt, a contempt referral with respect to Jeffrey Clark, who is a former Department Department of Justice official, or at least are going to start those proceedings. Those are expected to take place here on Capitol Hill tomorrow.
So the committee is not backing down when it comes to, criminal contempt cases. So I have a question, though, Jessica, about that. How much teeth do these, do these situations have? We know we're waiting to see how it works out for Steve Bannon, but what are the actual repercussions?
Well, I mean, the actual repercussions in this case, if the Select Committee and the House then vote with respect to other people to say, yes, we are referring this for criminal contempt charges, then we know that people could face up to a year in jail. They could face significant monetary penalties. And I think those are, in my view, those are real repercussions. You can also have what, frankly, we've seen more of in the past, what we're used to, which is kind of the slap on the wrist. Well, we're very upset with you and we're going to vote to hold you in contempt, but then there's no real concrete thing that happens at the end of it. I think that, we're in a slightly different paradigm where, frankly, I think the repercussion in a lot of these cases, or the threatened repercussion, does need to be potentially prison time jail time or a monetary fine, just because there's been less of that process of accommodation that we're so used to seeing when it comes to congressional subpoenas.
Right. All right. So, let's turn back then to the Federal Appeals Court, Jessica. How much is at stake for former President Trump and the House committee today? And could the court's decision set a significant precedent for the rest of the probe?
Yes, absolutely. I spent the morning listening to these arguments. As far as I know, they're still ongoing. Absolutely fascinating arguments. And so they have, and I love the way you phrase the question, because they have big implications for the current president, the former president, Congress, but bigger implications for whoever will be in those positions next. And that's what you heard the judges asking about, which is basically, what's Congress's power here to say, we're investigating a matter of national security. We need this information. What's the current occupant of the White House's power to say, I'm not asserting executive privilege. This is a qualified privilege. I, as the current occupant of the Oval Office, am in the best position to say, you know what, we're not going to assert executive privilege. We think that the public interest in having this information is higher. And then what's the power of whoever the former occupant is, not necessarily President Trump, but whoever the former president is, to say, why are you doing this? I'm the one who was in the White House. I'm the one who was the president at the time these documents were made. I have some authority here. So you're talking about these three stakeholders and how much power they have, that you hear the three judges struggling over, one, should we even be here? Can we even decide this dispute? And then two, what's the power of those three players, including, of course, the National Archive, which is actually holding the documents to make those determinations. Really interesting oral arguments this morning. And to your question, yes, really big implications for what can Congress's role be, the current president's role be, and the former president's role be, not just here, but going forward for decades to come.
Yeah, fascinating big legal issues that are being grappled with, for sure. And Jessica, Mr. Trump and his allies have invoked executive privilege in their attempts to stonewall Congress, as you know. So how has that defense fared so far in the courts up to this point?
So not particularly well thus far. And of course, the thing that's strange and complicated about former President Trump's assertions of executive privilege is that, at least with respect to some of the tranches of documents that the January 6th committee has asked for, the current president has said, no, I'm not asserting executive privilege. So former President Trump's claim is weaker for a host of reasons. One, there's a really strong public interest in knowing what happened leading up to and on January 6th and what high-level members of our government knew. Two, that the current president has said, I don't want to assert this qualified privilege. And three, that we haven't really ever seen a situation where the former president can try and come in, even given those two things, and say, no, don't release that information. So thus far, we haven't seen those arguments be particularly successful. But I will say people should look for the idea that President Biden will not say no executive privilege over everything, because he, I think, also wants to be mindful that he doesn't want to set a precedent of eviscerating or whittling away executive privilege.
Right. It's so interesting. There are so many legal issues here and angles. Jessica Levinson, thank you for filling us in on them. Nikole Killion as well. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.